Podcast Innovating Humanity. We have today wonderful guest from Portugal, right? Sergio Xavier. About two topics what are really like captured my mind, and I suppose we'll talk I don't know, more broadly, but those two topics are all related towards education, what is like my passion. And in this podcast we are trying to talk as much as possible about new angles, how to look at humanity from not like the global perspective, but like humanity begins with every individual, right? So if we find a template how to help one individual, we can maybe help society as well. So Sergio, nice to see you here.
Hello, good for to be here, and thank you for the invitation.
We met for the first time online, as we are doing right now. I was in Portugal actually, and Amarante, and you gave wonderful presentation of your ideas. And maybe I could just plainly and straightly ask you to tell this story. What hit me really kind of in a sweet spot regarding Plato's analogy of cave. So, for example, for 11 years, I'm working with this topic, what is like one of the root topics of society as a problem is people are not engaged in their works. They don't feel motivated. So people are not having their works where they can fulfill their potential. So we have this global pandemic of unmotivated people who are like harming themselves and society and workplace, something like that. So this analogy of Plato's is such a wonderful thing, and maybe we could just start and you could tell this story what Plato generated many thousands of years ago.
Okay, we can start by that. Plato, 2,400 years ago, something like that, in his book Republic, he mentioned the story, and perhaps you can start with the first image that we have for this. That was saying that there was this group of prisoners, and their backs were against the wall, and they were looking to shadows. These shadows were actually produced by another group of people that were passing by. The thing was that these prisoners were thinking that these shadows were the reality. It was the reality for them. They spent lots of time looking to the shadows, so they didn't got any input and additional input. So basically they thought that this was the reality for them. And the second slide, please. Then there is one prisoner that somehow manages to escape, and he or she goes behind the fire that is projecting the shadows and finds a way out from the cave. Actually, it is the moment that he or she understands that there is a cave, that they were in a cave. And well, simply and plain as that, he sees the sun, the light. It hurts to see the sun and the light, and to understand that the reality was not the shadows that they were living and immersed in their whole lives. And the other slide, please. So basically, this prisoner faces this urge to return and tell the others, and he really makes he or she makes a really a big effort to explain to the others that that was not the reality. That was not there were more things to know, and they were in a cave. But the prisoners didn't believe him at first. But after some insistence, the prisoners basically rejected him, and well, as we can understand by Plato's story, this person was killed by the other prisoners, because he or she was announcing a reality that was untruth to the others. Yeah, so that's the story. We can start from that. Now we can make a lot of conclusions and questions that could lead us in this conversation. So yeah, that is the story.
Okay, from maybe origins of this story for you, what emotionally kind of attached you to this story. From my perspective, this is always the question about looking beyond your traditions and creating next steps, but is like, again, next traditions, right? Just to be in the movement towards more humanity, more kindness, more intellectual openness and something like that. What that was for me. What hit you most emotionally when you heard this story first?
Yeah, well, the meaning of this story at different meanings in certain different moments in my life. Recently, it is very meaningful because it helps me to understand what is happening to me in terms of knowledge. It helps me to understand that I will be always limited in terms of understanding reality. It helps me to understand that I will be always inside some cave. Even if I get out one cave, I will be inside another one.
You will move from one illusion to next illusion to lesser illusion, but still illusion, right?
Yes, a limited reality, I would say, a limited reality.
Mm-hmm.
And well, that helps us to think a lot about the world today, the way that we live in the world, the way that we look in the world, that the way that we are immersed in the realities that the world proposes us. The way that the reality that we see is prescribed or not, if it is reflected, if it is what is the ownership that we have in the reality that we experience. So it helps us to think about that. That's for me the main tool, the main meaningfulness of this allegory of the cave as a tool. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I suppose you have talked with a lot of people with this analogy. And what is the main reaction? What you get from people? What is like their main insights or takeaways?
Well, in my experience, people enjoy to understand. It's always good to have things explained in a simple way. And when we cannot understand in a simple way what is happening to us, the different phenomena that are happening to us, so it's this allegory helps to understand that. So it's they enjoy. What happens afterwards, I'm not sure, because one thing is to enjoy the metaphor, another thing is to think about the metaphor. And thinking about this metaphor, if we use it to think about the world, is not an easy task, because it implies, I would say, for us to cut some relations with the shadows that we are looking for, to being distant and critical regarding to those shadows that we are looking for in the reality. So this is a different process. One thing is to enjoy the metaphor. Another thing is what we do with the metaphor.
Okay. This question sounded, I suppose, some kind of strange that I'm asking what people are taking away, because usually we are all unique, right? We take away a lot of aspects of and nuances and details because we have unique gene settings and so on, so on, so on. The thing is, though, is like I have this marketing / anthropology approach to things. So what we can understand, what kind of trends do we have in society? So maybe you have noticed some trends, because in terms of shadows or something like that, it's kind of one of the spiritual perceptions of reality, or philosophical perception of reality. And I don't know, some portion of society could say that I don't understand what the bullshit you are talking about. Sorry for my French, and therefore I'm asking what you see as a main insights, what your audiences have perceived.
Yeah. Okay, so I make a parallel between Plato's cave and Paulus Freire conception when he tries to, theorize what he calls what he calls the pedagogy of the oppressed. He says that people are immersed in some certain reality. They are immersed, so they don't necessarily have a developed critical sense of what they are experiencing as reality. And in order to get out of that, they need a certain process. To that process, Paulo Freire calls education. Okay? And that's why education might be an important tool in order for us to understand reality. And the process is not easy because it always implies a certain kind of self-transformation. Because we live in an oppressing reality, as Paulo Freire says. So our cave is oppressing somehow, because there are people with the different props making the shadows. Okay, so we are having some kind of a prescribed reality. We are doing not exactly what we want, but we are doing what we are being told to do.
And can we say this is like the principle of tradition? So the culture, this is just a culture of established biases, established stereotypes, established behaviors, not particularly good or bad, just established, right?
Yes, we can say that culture is one thing. I normally prefer to use a complicated word. I normally use the hegemony. So there are different hegemonies that concur in the apparatus that create what we are. Hegemonies, they include, for example, patriarchy. Let's say the power that the men traditionally, as you say, have in the world since we know from history. So because there is power, an asymmetric power between men and women end up what we say structurally discriminated or structurally excluded or structural victims of violence. But the fact that we are calling it as a structural problem, we are taking out the possibility of transforming that problem. And by saying that, we are assuming that both patriarchy problems are structural, but also we are denying the idea of transforming it. And basically what we are saying is that, hey, you are on this cave, but the cave will not change. So what you need to do is to stay in the cave and to deal with it. Patriarchy will never cease to exist. This happens to racism. This happens to social inequality. This happens to many phenomena that we see as impossible to change. So this is my take on, or at least the beginning of my take on Plato's cave. It helps me to understand that the problems that I'm being convinced that are structural, they are part of a cave. And if we manage to get out of the cave, we manage also to start imagining solutions and other possibilities and alternative narratives and so on and so forth.
Okay, so let's look at some solutions. I suppose you have been asked about solutions and what are the those ways when we move from one cave to other cave, right? What are the impulses? What creates that? Because for me, the main word would be homeostasis, right? So we are looking for this homeostasis and we want stability. Our brains are wired like that. We want stability. We want comfort, social conformity, right? This is like a huge part of the social conformity, to be afraid to be excluded. So what, for your perspective, would be, for example, right now in this humanity, with this educational system globally, usually kind of unified and similar, what are the impulses, what changes situations, what helps those guys who tell others about the sun and outside of the cave not to be killed, but listen to, and maybe this tribe moves to another cave. What are the impulses?
Yeah, well, I do believe that whatever is the solution comes in a collective process. This is one thing that I assume. It doesn't mean that it doesn't involve many individual processes, as you were saying in the beginning, so that I can reconcile with the lack of knowledge that I have of reality, so that I can, from that, I can build up, I can develop my critical thinking. But whatever happens, Paulo Freire as well, he mentions that the solution could be an educational process. But this educational process is not the educational process that we currently have and that we are, universalizing and globalizing. It is, how to say, one of the biggest achievements from liberal democracies is the fact that we were able to expand the network of education. More people in the world are accessing education than any time in history. This is a great achievement. Now, if we want to look to what kind of the education that is being provided, that's a different thing. And that is what I would say, what we need to think about. The education that we are getting is not the education that is preparing people to get out of the cave. Let me use the metaphor. The education that we are getting is the education that is preparing people to stay in the cave. Okay? And that's problematic because if we, in the moment that we are right now, have more, it is more easy to us right now to imagine a third world war or a nuclear Armageddon, we do have a problem with our cave. If for us it's easier to imagine, as Zizek said, to imagine the end of the world because of capitalism, than to imagine the end of capitalism, we do have a problem with our cave. So we need to get out of the cave. And the collective process to get out of the cave could be education. And that's what I called radical education. Radical education is a process that not only helps us to think about the cave where we are, to think critically about the things that in our education in the education that exists, we normally see it as stable. The stable phenomena that we look to education, such as economy, capitalism, democratic systems, the division west and east, the division north and south, inequalities, all the phenomena that we understand as structural and impossible to transform, all these we need to question. We need to create the space for collective questioning of that. And if this is done by children and young people, I think it's even better. I believe more in the capacity of children and young people to create alternatives and to imagine other democratic possibilities than I do believe in adults established somehow in the cave. So the collective process that could correspond to a solution, feasible, theoretically developed, because I'm talking about Paulo Freire, and the pedagogy of oppressed from Paulo Freire is from 1968. So we are not looking to something new. We do have a certain amount of hegemonies that are preventing us to follow the solution. It's not about the innovation, is not coming up with new ideas and putting them into practice. The innovation would be how to open up all the shadows and hegemonies that are pushing us inside to be inside a certain cave, to put that aside and to start thinking in the problems that we currently have with the solutions that were already created, but unfortunately they were not yet implemented. And that is the case with Paulo Freire's proposal. Of course, there is residual implementation of the pedagogy of the oppressed, as he calls it, but more important than that, the principles that he theorizes. There are a certain kind of implementation of that, but I think that we are very, very far away of achieving the solution that was proposed by him 50 years ago. For as an education as a process, as a global process for transforming the world in a better place. So we do have the solutions, but we are somehow finding very difficult to implement them.
Okay, Sergio, maybe you have one country in the world. What would be like the closest one to education you imagine? Could you name one?
I think there is no such country, because what happens with education policies is that they can be wherever they are happening, region of the world wise, or political regime wise. They are the same, basically. This is also defended by some writers, that having education in a democratic system and having education in a more autocratic system.
So, for example, let's compare Finland and North Korea. Let's say, for example, those both of the.
It's the same. It's the same. Education is curricular. You need grades that are prescribed by third-party actors. You have teachers. You have a network, an infrastructure network that is normally controlled by the state or by private entities that make business from that. You have the curriculum is controlled by a Ministry of Education. The people that are involved in the process, the learners, they don't have much of a say in what they are learning. So you have a competitive process. Many things are similar in the educational curriculum. There is a paper from Robert Dale from some 30 years ago that defends that there is a globalized process of creating a kind of a universal education. So we cannot, I don't think that we can establish a real difference between different states. Of course, what happens is that each Ministry of Education has a certain kind, a different approach, and this approach is contextualized. We can say that Scandinavian countries have a different approach than the south of Europe, for example. Yes, of course, we can identify different approaches, but the essential elements that make education as it is, they are similar in every country of the world, and that's a problem. That's a problem. In one hand, I think it underlines the idea that I was telling you about hegemony. Okay, there is an hegemony, an hegemonical tendency in the way that education is deployed, and the proof of that is that education policies are probably the most similar policies in all the world between each different country. There are others, of course, but education is one of probably one of the most similar. So having this power, in this lack of power in deciding what happens with our education, okay, it's another obstacle for us to transform education as we would like to do so. Another thing to answer to your question is, all of us, we know what is wrong with education. We know, we might have more or less reflection about it, but as parents, as learners, as teachers, as decision makers, policy officers, we know that education is wrong.
We don't know how to solve it, but we know that it's wrong. It kind of doesn't work in that sense.
More. We might even know how to solve it,
okay,
but we are not managing to do it. And the question for me is why? Why aren't we able to solve that? And I think the answer to this question comes back to hegemonies. We don't have enough power to transform something that is wrong. Okay, so hegemony is a concept that the more you can make whatever you want, you can exercise whatever you want, but you will not change something, because we all somehow make this to be the same. We all somehow make pressure so that the shadows stay. Okay, so we are all in the cave and we are reproducing what the shadows say. So I'm not sure if I responded to your question, but this is my take on hegemony and what is the educational problem behind it.
Okay, I would like to talk next topic about impulses, what makes societies to change, let's say from anthropological perspective. But first, I would like to just to rewind it a little bit. When I asked you about the similarities regarding Finland and North Korea, I suppose you would shock a lot of guys, a lot of people, that you will say, yeah, that's the same. It's like, what? And I have this feeling about that context is really important. So we can have systems what breaks people, and we can have systems what nourishes people's potential. Do you agree with that? That the system is not the worst word in the worst word or meaning in the world. It's like the system. The system can be good for creativity. System can be oppressing for creativity. So, what did I hear it wrong? That system is at the core of it.
Perhaps. So coming back to the comparison between Finland and North Korea, you can read the theoretical framework for that from Henri Giroux, a Canadian educator, still alive, expert in critical culture studies, and he writes about education. So this is something that you can find more developed by Henri Giroux. Sorry, can you repeat the question, the system question?
So my thing is like that I heard two aspects. One is system, and second aspect is question about context. So for example, in Finland, I was in Ministry of Education something like 11 years ago, and they said, listen, we want to go away a bit from grades. We want to emphasize or target that we need to help people to be happy. So this is like one of the primary goals that we have. So they are moving, in a sense that into that direction. I suppose North Korea is not doing that. So we all have systems. We have raised in family. Family has systems. Family had hegemony. Family has culture. So human society, as it's constructed, usually are based in some kind of systems. What are like culturally based or biases, demeanors, whatsoever. So doesn't context creates difference? Because from my perspective, I love word system. The question is, does system end result is like worker for factory, or end result is happy person who is like free and thinking for himself about exploring what is out of the cave?
Yeah, let's say context makes it different. But as you say, in my perspective, systems are always the same. And how can I explain this? For example, Finland, a liberal democracy, as part of, the liberal democratic world order that is, portrayed by United Nations, but it's much more than that. Okay, even now we can see how this dispute is still in place, with the prolongation of the Cold War that we thought that was over, but but there is some kind of dispute on that. So the liberal order from that Finland represents believes in a certain kind of development. This development is carried through and developed through economy. Country, conceptually, liberal democracies defend that a country that is able to produce and to economically develop, this country will never have problems. And more than that, it says that every individual living in this country will always have better conditions of life if the country keeps doing with the economic development. So what Finland makes is to register their learners into the corporative market, create the conditions for the learners to participate in this economic development in order for them to get more conditions and for the country as overall get more conditions. So basically, educations in liberal democracies, they are economic centric. Okay, the what we call competencies,
labor market centric, kind of that.
They want you to basically, the final aim is to put you in the labor market. And when you are in the labor market, there are other educational concerns. But the process of education is done. It was successful if you enter in your labor market. It doesn't matter if you learn something. It doesn't matter that if you learn what you wanted to learn. It doesn't matter, anything of that matters. What matters is that you become a part of the whole that is the economical development. So there is a different approach perhaps in North Korea. I don't know. Perhaps it is, for example, the militarization of young people. I don't know. I'm just supposing. But that is change. That is different between Finland and North Korea. What is not different is that education still serves a purpose that is bigger than the learner. Bigger and smashes completely the aspirations of the learner. Smashes in the sense that the aspirations of the learner don't matter at all. It doesn't matter, for example, if the learner, instead of participating in the development of economy, wants to question the development of the economy, and more than that, wants to transform the model of development of economy. It doesn't matter if the learner questions the model of work that puts the learner from 8 to 5 in a certain job that he or she doesn't want to have. It doesn't matter if the learner has some sort of proposal, some sort of alternative, some sort of imaginary that wants to be that he or she wants to construct in order to create a radical transformation to what everyone is seeing as something wrong. I don't know. Perhaps the job market is changing from 15, 20 years until now. We now have different phenomena like the digital nomads or the telework. There are many things that are changing in work, which I would say they create more flexibility, at least in many cases. In other cases, not like that, but at least they create more options to some people. But still, we still need to have a wage, a form of income in order to access what we now call human rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we might say that is a very important document, and I do say that. It is a very important document that was an achievement from liberal democracies. Still, it is a document that says also, here is your shopping list, because without money, you will not access these human rights.
Okay, so
and I'm talking.
Yeah. So the thing, what I understand, just to summarize, do I understand it correctly, that instead of not just only going as education, the tool for preparing us for the labor market, we have to take care about what a human being itself wants. And it can be whatever it can be, right? It can be myriad of opportunities and wishes and dreams and whatsoever, kind of that. Not to just structurize this person, this human being, in terms of habits, skills, and something like that, just for the labor market, right?
Yes, what we have now in education is a tool for alienation. Okay, it's continuous alienation in a certain proposal of reality and a certain proposal of living life.
Okay,
we are alienating.
Sorry, what is opposite of alienating from reality? What, in your terms?
Liberating. If people, instead of being proposed to be alienated in a certain prescribed reality, prescribed path of life, if they are proposed to question the prescription of that way of life, only there you'll start having a different education.
Wonderful, Sergio. Just I will throw you one idea that comes to mind when I'm thinking about that, because from my perspective, education should serve for three purposes, three goals. One, to learn about yourself, who you are, what you want to be. So this is the first person kind of task of education. It is mindfulness, emotional intelligence, a bit of spirituality. Who am I? What I want to do? And it includes some kind of questioning where I am, what do I want to do. Second one is preparing for family life, whatever family you want to have, because family is such a huge skill set what you need to have in terms of communication, in terms of empathy, blah, blah, blah. And third is labor market. So those three aspects, what I would say is really important in terms of your concept of radical education. How does it work like that, or well, you can crash me, whatever. You just be straight.
No.
Be radical.
No. I think it's nice to have these principles. Okay, I think it's good because they make us think and they help us to reflect about what is good, what is wrong with education. I would say that registering people in the labor market would not be a principle that I will take. Why? Because I will be more concerned in questioning the labor market. So I will not start by saying, so what would you like to do in the labor market? I will start by asking, how would you like to question the labor market? Or I'll say, what do you feel about the labor market? Okay. And from that, we can start the construction of other imaginaries. And the imaginary, for example, where a world without labor market exists. Okay, where a world where people don't have necessarily income to access their human rights. Human rights are accessed in other way. The problem is that because we cannot imagine such things because we are looking to what we call structural things, hegemonies. We don't even think that education would be useful in doing this kind of task. And this is, I would say, in most of the minds of who designs educational policies and who implements them as well. Of course, you can do different approaches, as I was saying before. You can have different methodological approaches, but in the end, the result, we often divide formal education and non-formal education. But many of the things that non-formal education are doing, the final aim is also making people more included in the job market, making people more productive in the economic development of a certain state, making people more, I would say, increasing the performance of people in the tasks that are being prescribed by the state, or So I think that what we are doing with the different methodologies might be exactly the same. Okay, some of the methodologies are perhaps more humane, are more funnier, are more so to say careful. They have more quality, but still, in the end, the aim would be exactly the same. What will be the purpose? You say that I could be shocking people by saying that Finland and North Korea education systems were basically the same. I still saying, and I think I explained why. Now, human rights. We have what is called in Europe, we have what is called the political agenda of human rights education. This agenda is not so recent. It has perhaps 30 years, something like that, in Europe, and we basically aim to create a certain culture of human rights, like a global culture of human rights, which means that people will not question the Universal Declaration of Human Rights or the European Convention of Human Rights. They respect human rights, but they don't go beyond human rights. So this is also a way to reproduce a certain prescription, the prescription that the only way to access dignity, human dignity, is through human rights. And these human rights are a normative document. That is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That is problematic. And why is that problematic? Because of what I said
problematic that we are not questioning and not going beyond and deeper.
Exactly,
okay.
Exactly. Why is that problematic? Because for many people in the world, indeed, this works because people have the means to access their human rights. The Universal Declaration, or the shopping list, okay, to be more ironic. The shopping list works for the people that are able to buy the products of the shopping list. But the people that are unable to buy the products of the shopping list, they always have to rely in different ways to access this human dignity. And the problem is that if human dignity is something basic for every human being, why it is not basic for the ones that are not able to buy the products from the shopping list? And this is problematic, okay? So I would say that it will be very interesting to question the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as there is, not to question the human dignity. That's a different thing, okay? Human dignity, it's much more wider and, let's say, much more stable for me, at least as a concept, than human rights. Human rights are the tool to reach human dignity, but I would not, perhaps we could also make radical thinking about human dignity. That's not my case. That's not my reflection. My reflection is about the tool that is being used to access it, or to not access it, to inhibit the access to that human dignity. And so human rights, the Declaration of Human Rights create, of course, the ability to talk about human rights, to talk about human dignity, but also create a structural division between the ones that are able to easily access that products and the ones that are unable to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And that will be a critical problematic point. So human rights education, to finish my point, human rights education very rarely addresses this, okay? Human rights education generally tries to, I would say, I'll use also the word alienation, to alienate people into the tools, the normative tools that are being prescribed by the liberal democratic order. So the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. People need to understand the importance of anti-racism, for example, the importance of inclusion, the importance of equal rights for everyone. People get out of these human rights education sessions with this reflection. Still, they are not thinking about the tools themselves, the declaration, the normative, what is the law. Okay, they are not thinking about that, and I think that this is basically creating the same status quo as all the other educations, because we are being, how to say, indoctrinated into a certain prescribed reality. And if we don't question this prescribed reality, then we are doing much of the same, even if we use different methodology, even if we have different names and so on.
So I really like this approach of, Discovery Channel had this slogan for a while, question everything. And it's really nice kind of meme, so to speak, or kind of concept, question everything. And so, for example, I'm working with this how to find your passion or how to find your calling. This is kind of one of my priorities. What I found that, for example, I have been working with a lot of students, and even if student is on the second grade or in university or third grade, fourth grade, whatsoever, they are still looking, I don't know if I want to be electrician, if I want to be this or that. So they don't have this basic understanding who they are. So they didn't have, or they don't have tools for understanding themselves. So this question everything, or question what is around you, it's kind of really great aspect, and it reminds me kind of a scientific method. So there is homeostasis, and there are always new scientists who are just questioning this homeostasis, right? They're questioning what is the status quo, what is happening here, and then it comes to me this topic about and why kind of I believe in systems, because system can create this opportunity for most people, but always with the systems there will be some kind of abuses, there will be mismanagements of systems, but blah blah blah. But there comes this idea that, for example, to find your passion or find your calling is one of the biggest topics that you need to give for any kid in every school. From my perspective, I don't know. You please comment on that, and maybe you will say this is whatever bullshit. And again, my French, sorry. Second topic is the question about soft skills, and especially based around mindfulness. So mindfulness, again, just to get deeper in myself. And third is really bizarre, and maybe this is kind of radical, because for last year I have started to work with subconscious, because we have these irrational perceptions, and we identify with them, and then we kind of can understand that, oh, listen, this is from my mother, this is my father, and I'm just in this chain of continuation of biases, something like that. So this is in my subconscious, just subconscious, because I haven't just pulled them out. So what are your comments on that? Because I really like this concept of questioning. So that would be like a game when teacher can say for the kid, listen, if you find some new way how to solve this mathematical problem, go for it. Instead of what I have noticed, so for example, that teacher says, yes, answer is right, but the way how you reach this answer is incorrect. So just kind of encourage to question everything, question history, for example, question biology, because science discovered new things and something like that. So question everything, mindfulness, and find your calling, find your passion as a really important attributes to that afterwards people can kind of nourish to their directions in life, but they choose good for them.
Yeah. Well, so many things. No, I think that in order for us to question something, I think it would be important for us to have a sort of ground understanding that we are always limited in making, even when we question. Because how can you question something when you don't know, when you don't know the whole, when you don't know? How can you question the shadows that you see in the cave if you don't know that you are in a cave? There are many other things. There is light, there is the sun that creates reality. but you only have the shadows. How can you question the shadows if you don't know that there is a sun? So there is always a kind of paradoxical thing about questioning, because you are questioning the reality that you have. Still, how can you question the reality that you have if you don't have the other tools for, you know, contrasting with the reality that you have? And that it comes with time, I think. It's the only possibility. You do the exercise, as you're saying, of questioning, and that exercise, it's putting you, you know, progressively outside of the cave. It's giving you some glances and so on, so that at some point, perhaps after some years thinking about a certain subject, you would be able to really think about the sun, because already see it. But you need time in order to see it. So this for me would be a basic principle. So when people find their passion, I think there is, well, there's lots of literature about that, for sure. Passion is, I would say, a very, very interesting subject, because also it's also paradoxical. I could find my passion by looking to the shadows. Perhaps,
yeah, absolutely.
Perhaps I don't.
Absolutely.
Perhaps
yeah.
I don't. Perhaps I don't. So how can you find a passion, or can you find like your big aspiration, your central aspiration, if that is something that you're looking forward to? How could you find, if what you have, the stimuli that you have is a limited stimuli? Maybe you need to explore at the same time that you find your passion. So that's where questioning and also is useful. So while you're in the process of understanding what is your passion, maybe it's also important to question your passion. I don't know.
I couldn't agree more, because I will send you my book. So I have this book, 11 Rules How to Find Your Passion. And there is always this topic that you are evolving human being, and you are actually, there is this concept of being from one cave to other cave. It's always like that, because you can be for 5 years like a dentist, and then you feel, listen, I need to go to education. So you are moving towards, because you are evolving human being, and you are getting from one illusion about yourself to next lesser, so to speak, illusion.
Yeah, I think that's a good understanding of our limitations. I think that's good. If we understand that we are always limited, I think we are getting more accurate in what we are in the boundaries that we are establishing for our knowledge. As there is this concept that with every knowledge there is ignorance. So when you gain knowledge, you always gain ignorance. So I think it is important that we create this ambiguity in the things that we know. And coming back to the Greek school, there is this very known quote, which is, "I only know I only know that I don't know nothing."
Socrates.
Something like that. Socrates have made this survived for thousands and thousands of years, and I think it's meaningful in this case. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So let's jump to this most kind of complex question of it all. So what changes societies? So what is your take? I have this one really strange example. What I'm really inspired about that. Suddenly in European Union, we couldn't smoke in a cafeterias. I'm not smoker, but I was really happy that suddenly I was sitting in the cafeteria and there was no one kind of blowing smoke in my face. So that suddenly happened, right? And it happened, I felt like out of nowhere. There was some kind of ignited idea, and the spark just went away in these bureaucrat corridors, and they just made this decision. And that was, from my perspective, one of the strangest kind of upgrades for humanity, so to speak, when something like that happened. And maybe you have idea what is like the structure or principles, how society moves on what moves it from one part of cave or illusions or limited reality to other. What are your examples, or how you can inspire people?
Okay. Okay, I have three things to tell about that. Let me see if I can remind all of them.
Okay.
So about smokers and smoking in closed spaces, I think that part of that political strategy was the fact that people were already divided. So there was not a clear hegemony from the ones who smoke to the ones that don't smoke. There was a big division between people, and that made possible for policies to endure and to be established, I think.
So because society was ready for change, you mean by that? So politicians received this signal from society that we are ready, that that law will be accepted?
Not sure if I would put it on that terms, that society was ready for change. I would say that change would be possible because the balance that was existing, the social balance that was existing in the system or in the society was balanced. So this means that no one will turn against each other significantly. This means that the policymakers could do their job, and the people will not create instability into the political process. So I would say that they took the advantage of having a divided society in order to create what could be called as progress, social progress towards the health agenda. Okay. Now, we could also talk about the health agenda, and we could also, for example, establish a parallel with COVID and the way that how it is being dealt. But I don't know if that is the point of this conversation. I have two other things to say about that. The first thing is, okay, processes. I think that if it is there a formula, if is there like a magic formula for us to change, to create social change, I don't think that there is something like that. What exists is opportunities that could arise, or that they are there, and together with strategies, this is a possibility for collective transformation. But I think that many times we have the opportunities and we are not recognizing the opportunities because of the shadows, because we live not only seeing the shadows but performing according to what we see in the shadows. So we are the shadows, actually. We are many things in the system, in the society. So I would say, for me, one thing that I think it is important for us to interrupt this idea, this grand narrative of the end of history. So when the Berlin Wall has fallen in 1989, we look to the world in a different way. There was a dispute of hegemonic power between what would be the liberal democratic world order and the Soviet communism. This was basically dividing the world. They were disputing who will have like a dominant hegemony. And clearly, at that moment, liberal democracies have won. The democracies of capitalism have won. And this hegemony was established. There was a writer, a North American writer called Francis Fukuyama, that developed this concept of the end of history. He didn't develop the concept, actually. He updated the concept. It was like a prophecy from Kant that, 300 years ago, someone has told that the history will reach a certain point of development that will reach its end. There will not be any more significant development steps. And then Fukuyama, he picked the historical fact that the resolve of this hegemony between liberal democracies and Soviet communism, and he said, okay, now liberal democracies are established as the dominant universal form, the most perfect universal form of government. And now we will basically have reached the end of history. There will be no more significant updates, historical updates, in terms of civilizational process. Okay, but I think that we are stigmatizing ourselves in the cave if we do that.
That sounds terrible. Absolutely, yeah.
That's as terrible as it sounds, I think.
Yeah.
We do have a problem with that, because if we don't believe that there will not be any more significant step in history, it means that we are, as Paulo Freire says, dehistoricizing ourselves. We say, it is funny that because we say that we can participate in society, but we are not supposing that we are making history. It is very interesting. This is paradoxical as well. We make training courses about youth participation, citizenship, and so on, but all that is limited by the boundary of the end of history. So,
sorry, just to say that there is this analogy. What I'm usually I'm telling in my learning courses about brain. Brain has just two states: it grows or it goes in degradation. So it's not, there is no homeostasis, never. And actually, what you are saying, that if we don't have a goal how or where to grow or develop, actually we is using analogy of brain, we are actually dead inside, or we are degrading. So we need this goal and believe that we can grow, right?
And the proof of what you're saying, that we are kind of degrading or in a kind of social depression, collective depression, I don't know how to call it. The proof of that is that there are still many problems at global level. Well, I mentioned some of them, but we can go for more specific ones. We have an ongoing refugee crisis in Europe, an ongoing and growing crisis in Europe. I'm not talking necessarily about the recent events in Ukraine only. Those are serious events, but we are still having a crisis that lasts for 10 years almost in the Mediterranean. So I think that this is the kind of problems that we know that they exist, and we are being unable to solve them. So the proof of that we are reaching the end of history is not so productive to us, is that we are not able to solve this kind of problems. Now, I forgot what I wanted to say. It comes with complicated conversations. Sorry for that. But yeah, the end of history.
So we were talking about when we don't have a goal for society to grow, actually we are just stopping, and there is no such a thing as stopping on a threshold. We are going up or down, so we are degrading or we are developing.
Yeah, the proof of that is that we are being blocked in our imaginary. There is no such a study, of course, because it will be very difficult to do. But if we try to study the imaginaries of people, how they imagine the world, in 10 years, 15, 20, 30 years. I think that many of the people that I talk with, every day, different people and so on, these imaginaries that I feel is imaginaries that are, reaching the opposite of utopia. We are not dreaming about better world. What we are imagining is the lack of a better world and a worst world. And that's what is called dystopia. We are reaching what I would call a dystopian stage in the end of history moment. Because for now it is easier for us to imagine the end of the world than to imagine a better world. And of course, I'm generalizing. Of course, this is not felt for everyone, and hopefully it is not felt for everyone. But what I say is that the people that I talk with in my everyday life, which are part also of the construction of my imaginary, their ability to imagine a better world is getting degraded. This ability is being blocked. And the ability that we are creating is the ability to imagine a world that is worse, a world where there is no gas because there will be no gas in Europe, a third world war, nuclear bombing, militarization, anger. So this is the world that we are being able to imagine. And if we are at the stage of being more able to imagine this world than a better world, this says a lot about the world that we have coming if we don't get out of the end of history. This is my take.
Analogy of what I use sometimes for education is that we are thinking how to improve this broken education instead of changing education. So let's say we are using, I don't know, 25 years old Opel or maybe bicycle to try to bring some heavy loads or ships to different place, and instead to changing bicycles to cars, we are still trying to improve bicycles. So this is the concept of the cave. An analogy from Plato is just wonderful here. And it's really kind of interesting that I just remembered one scientific study, what I'm usually as well sometimes use in my lectures and training programs about incentives that, for example, what goal or what motivation you have, such a brain parts will activate during this activity. So, for example, if you have motivation for communication to listen to other one, so your brain parts will activate that you will be able to listen better. If I have motivation to persuade you, I will have these brain parts who are like just trying to find new ideas just to kind of pressure you. And I use this principle actually when I wanted to run marathon. I hate running. When I ran marathon, and every time when I started to go to running practice, I just remembered my goal, and instead in 3 months I ran this marathon in 3 weeks. So this motivation does so much to our bodies, to our whole beings. So that what I'm hearing here is the question about do we have our common goal, where to go, where to strive to, unless we will stay old and we will kind of degrade. And by the way, we are not. This degradation, as usually it happens, we don't see it, right, day by day. It's just after 5 years, it's a little bit worse. After 5 years, again, it's a little bit worse. And so Trump in the United States or whatever, Brexit, what happened, and not particularly good or bad, but the thing is like that a lot of lies, what flies around in political spheres, right? So there is a lot of things what couldn't be imagined in 20 years ago, I suppose, right, in some sense.
Yeah, you can establish a line of pessimism.
Yeah, absolutely.
Since 2001, at least, I think you can establish a line of pessimism in what is happening with the liberal democratic world order and in Europe and beyond, of course.
Though the fun thing is like somehow I would say that when there is stagnation, we need crisis. So to stop this stagnation, we need crisis. So that crisis can somehow shift this focus to one place or another. So right now, I'm just trying to kind of summarize this last question of mine, because we have this innovating humanity topic, right? How to innovate ourselves. And for me, it always comes again back. I do agree with education, because this is kind of, I'm like old broken record, right? All the time about education. I'm talking all the time about education. Therefore, we are talking right now here. What would be your, I don't know, top 3 crash test for dummies, bullet points? What would say, listen, let's do this, let's do that, or let's do this, and it will eventually somehow, maybe by these impulses or by these points, it can get better.
Okay, difficult to put it in bullet points. It's a
Absolutely,
difficult
absolutely.
task. Yeah. So what I would say is that we need to experiment more with education, and more radically. This is one thing that we need to do. As you said, the model is broken, and it's not worth to keep insisting in the same model. We declared a crisis in the education since the 60s. This is something that is known.
Since the
So
60s, since 60s, that was declared crisis in Europe or United
yes,
States or England or.
no, there is books from the 60s that are pointing out that the global education is in crisis. So I don't think that this is a problem from now. The problem now it is that we know this for 50 years and we are doing anything about that. Or at least what we are doing is what you said. We are reproducing an old model and not really transforming it. So yes, we need to experiment more radically with education, not only about the topics, because radicality is not about the topics, but also about the education itself, the education process itself, which is not methodology. Methodology is another thing, but the way that people learn things, these needs to change, and the things that are learned, this needs to change. So this is one thing. A second thing is to create all the forms of support for this education to happen, because education, to think radically, is not going to live without support. It will be only residual if it doesn't have institutional support. A huge transformation as as getting out of the cave requires the collective support of everyone. And because also there are risks in when you promote radical education, professional risks, social risks, by doing that, you really need that support to happen. And also that support needs to be given even if the consequences of that radical education process are also targeting the institutions that are supporting this educational process. And this is very difficult to accept. This is very, how to say, radical. But institutions need to open themselves for this kind of vulnerability in order for this to happen. Also, then the other actors, the individuals that are promoting education. So educators, teachers, the youth workers, educators in kindergartens. I mean, all the people that are working in education, they, I think they could go through an individual process. And understanding at which point they are in the cave, and to understand what they need to do in order to promote a more radical thinking education. So because if they are the reproducers, they are the front line of reproduction of a system that we know that is not working. And even if they try to be the best in what they are doing, they have the conditions of the system. So we need people that could question the conditions of the system and could experiment more radical forms of education in the front line. There are risks with that. And that's why you need institutional support and social support in general. So that's what I would say. It's not that simple, but that's what I would say.
Interesting that the first time when I heard in Portugal this concept of radical education, what I understand from marketing perspective, or how ideas kind of integrates in society, the word radical means that it will be slower. This is one of the basic strange paradoxes that, so for example, if you say something like, everyone is doing this, so this means it's not radical. It will go farther, quicker, deeper, and something like that. So in terms of marketing, when you say word radical, it's kind of it is really well understandable for philosophers, I suppose, from anthropologists, from educational people who are looking for change. For 90% of society, it could be like a stumbling block. What's your take on that?
The word radical the meaning of the word radical is being disputed since ever. So not since ever, but since the 19th century, I would say, there is an increase dispute regarding the concept of radicality and what is radical and so on. In the last 8 years, 10 years in Europe, it's being disputed because of the anti-terrorist laws. It started with a terrorist attack. This attack led to a certain kind of direction in European policies, and the concept emerged as something that needs to be prevented. So many policies in Europe are articulated anti-terrorism with youth work, for example, and they call themselves prevention of radicalization, as if radicalization were something to be prevented. That's not my perspective. I think that other things need to be prevented. Violence needs to be prevented. Perhaps extremism needs to be prevented. But radical thinking, for me, it's essential, and it is a right that people have, a fundamental right, I would say, that people have. Because if we do that, we are also slicing the right that people have to think. I need to be able to think radically. This is the least that I ask from my right to think. So radicality does not need to be prevented. Other things need to be prevented. So that narrative of the radical as something bad, as something coming from the far right, as something coming articulated with violence, this is the concept that we need to deconstruct in the next years in Europe. I mean, at the academic level, I think that everyone knows. I think the big, how to say, the big misunderstanding was at the political level when this happened, not at the academic level. If you're going to read any paper about, if it is commissioned or not, about the prevention of radicalization, this paper will always start with a framework of what is the radical, and we'll try to deconstruct the concept that was being built politically in Europe in the last years. So I think we have to deconstruct that as well as educators. And also, you said, what did you say? I forgot.
You know, Sergio, I'm just okay. One short story. There were guys who were offering my for TEDx, for example, me as a speaker, right? They said, "Listen, let's Zuarguss go and have a speech." And 2 times I was offered, or I don't know. I just know from the guys who were offering me, and those guys who were like deciding who were going on to speak or not. They said he's too radical. And what I understand in terms of homeostasis again, in terms of traditionalism, so the basic Maslow pyramid 2 bases are really the strongholds, right, of this cave or these traditions, and safety, and then safety are the main words. So what I understand from in terms of marketing, so for example, if even 90% of society wants change, they will have this change allowed when you use some kind of symbols or words what they accept and what they associate with whatever words associate with safety. So in these terms, I receive and I see you as a scientist who speaks plainly as semantics of these words mean, right, from etymology and something like that. What I am kind of thinking right now is just about marketing perspective. So how to society ease into this change. So you are the one who is coming from the upper levels of the cave and not to be killed, right? So let's not use these words. Let's not use these words. These words are not. These words are not usable, and so on, so on, so on.
Yeah, I can how to say, I can understand this approach. The problem is that if we stop being able to use our language in order to create meanings, and if we start engaging manipulation through language, we are creating a communication artifact as well, because because we are trying to stop prescribing the prescription in society, we turn ourselves as prescribers, and I don't want to do that. So what I try to do as a scientist is to provide things as they are, as I see them. Of course, there's a limitation, an individual limitation on them, and from that, people can do whatever they want with that. So I don't went through, secondary words if the meaning that I wanted was radical education. If I lost 300 readers of my papers or whatever, okay, I can deal with that. It's okay. I can deal with that. But in the end, my contribution is for the ones that could read and create a reflection from what they read, and try to also to deconstruct their judgmental, perhaps a judgmental approach, what is radical and what is not radical, if it is bad, if it is violent. Anything that I propose with radical education is violent. Well, it can be politically violent, of course. It's because it
not physically violent, just to be clear, right? It's kind of just in terms of change.
I don't write about physical violence. I don't write about violence, actually. But I believe that this kind of social transformation processes can be violent, can be perceived as violent for many. They will not be transformation if this doesn't happen. It implies a shaking of society. So of course this can be perceived as violent. One last thing that I recall is that you mentioned that something radical needs time to change. Radical transformation comes with time. I'm not sure about that for two reasons. First, historically.
Sorry. I said that when you name something radical, it will implement slower because people will have more resistance.
Okay.
In that sense. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, got it. No, I am sorry because I understood wrongly.
Yeah, because a lot of things has happened kind of in a daytime, or revolutions or something like that. The question is how to sustain it, how to implement it, and how to be like especially in a human way, how to prolong it.
Exactly. But 2 points about this still, which is if we look to processes as the French Revolution, those processes, I mean, the revolution itself didn't take more than 10 years or something to happen. This was actually the first process that was called a radical change in terms of, in political terms. The origins of the word radical used politically come from the French Revolution, which is one of the steps that many find fundamental in the birth of modern democracies.
Or scientific revolution through Newton and Einstein and Bohr and something like that. Yeah. Okay.
So many of the things that we called radical in the past, they are part of the democracies that we enjoy today. So how could we stop the radicality if we want to keep the democratic development that we are looking back to history? It does mean that I'm into that democratic development. I'm just saying, pointing out the finger to that paradox. It is a contradiction that we can find in that. Also, about time, I think that democracies, liberal democracies, play a trick on us, which is to say that the so-called structural problems take time to transform. Of course, we can also see proofs of different transformations in rights, for example, women rights, refugees' rights, LGBT communities' rights, and so on. We can see some kind of progress in these rights, but the phenomena stays. We still have homophobia. We still have racism. We still have social inequality. We still have gender inequality. So the phenomena will stay because they are structural. And the trick that is being played by us is that it will take so much time to change that when it is not changing in 20 years, we forgot already that it didn't change. That actually it was the same problem that existed 20 years ago. So in democracy, we have this idea that transforming structural things takes time. My point is not necessarily. It is not necessarily like that. Another thing that you were mentioning was I forgot, but sorry.
Listen, we have had
it's a complicated topic, but
this is complicated topic, and this is a really important topic. And I suppose that we have talked with something like half an hour, hour and a half, really intense conversation. And honestly, I think that we have given for our viewers and listeners plenty to think about. And I just thought that we will have this, I would say deep conversation from unusual angle, and it kind of exceeded my expectations, really, Sergio. And this topic about Plato Cave, about how we perceive radical and human rights aspect, and that systems, and this is hugely important. And for me, as a human being who likes anthropology and marketing and education and political kind of systems, I think there lies lot of topics. And what I hear from you, you are like true scientist who is like with your integrity, you speak your mind, you speak your belief. The question for me is like how it can be cascaded down, calibrated down, or scaled down, right, to these impact makers, decision makers, how it can change, because there is lot of aspects to it to digest, and at least I will think about it for a while. Absolutely. And you know what I can promise, that especially in YouTube or on Facebook or whatever, Instagram, and we will put these these conversations out, I will add your paper of radical education. That would be
okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Go through it. And please go dig in deeper, and I just really hope that some smart guys will listen and find your concepts really appealing. And I suppose you can be found on social media and so on, right?
Not much.
I mean, you can be contacted.
Not much, but yes, it can be manageable. Yes. Okay. I'm approachable. That's what I mean. Yes.
Okay. So anyway, I just conclude this conversation with my impression that first time when we met in Portugal again via online, I was really kind of touched by these analogies from Plato and your concept, and we need these fresh angles, how to look at things, not to our comfort levels, right? But just to really kind of look more broadly and look in the more different meta levels, as Einstein was saying, right? When we are thinking from the same loop, we are still in the same loop, and it's kind of schizophrenic, kind of that. Okay, Sergio, that was such a pleasure to talk with you, and I'm sorry that for the three times you kind of couldn't go on with your thoughts. That maybe I was dragging you too deep or whatever. I don't know what happened. By the way, maybe this summer heat is doing some damage, or what's happening?
No, Zuarguss, thank you very much for the invitation. It is I think for everyone also to understand. It was completely unplanned the way that we made this conversation, and because it was such a deep topic, it is very I would say natural that the complexity of the topic puts us away from different thoughts. We could go through many paths, and sometimes we forget the others. So it's okay. Thank you very much. I think it was I heard things with this conversation. It helped me to think about something that I was not never thinking before, about the marketist approach. How can this be more approachable? And yeah, I have thoughts that I take from here. And yeah, it was a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for conducting us through the conversation. It was great.
Sergio, thanks a lot, and let's keep in touch. And I will put for everyone your paper in the descriptions where you can see. And if you want to, you can reach out for Sergio as a lecturer. You were really good. You were really good. As a guy who is hiring a lot of lecturers, you were really good. So possibly.
Good to know. Thank you.
Absolutely, possibly. Let's meet in a working environment as well. Okay, have a nice summer in Portugal, and let's keep in contact.
Yeah, you too. Thank you very much.
Okay, cheers.
See you soon.
Bye.